So, welcome to the Agile Strategy Meetup group. My name is Morten Elvang, and today we have Jurriaan Kamer visiting.
All right. So yeah, the focus I wanna bring for this conversation is unblocking organizations to enable strategy. Because if you're asking me the advice about what should companies focus on, well, having strategy is great, but often the organization, in a lot of ways, is in the way for realizing it. So that is going to be my focus because strategies are nice, but they won't work if you don't have the organization that supports it. And because the fact of life is like it's not as easy. It's not like you can just pick any future you want, make a plan, and then you go there. Like it's not that easy. It really requires many people, many teams, time, effort, money to achieve the goals that you have in mind. And that's what I want to talk about. And especially in the agile world, we are probably familiar with types of debt, and I want to talk about that for a second. So, financial debt is well known, right? You go to the bank, you lend money, and then you have to pay interest until you pay the money back. And then most of the agile practitioners that are here, they'll also know technical debt, right? So it's the corners you cut, it's the system you don't upgrade, it's the old infrastructure that you don't invest in, and that just makes your delivery slower and slower and slower. But there's a third type of debt that is particularly interesting to me, that is often overlooked, and that is organizational debt. Those are all the principles, practices, beliefs, systems, processes that are hindering you from achieving the goals you have. And the painful thing about that is that type of debt is not on the balance sheet, right? It's not something that we can count often. So, but it's really real. Like the cost is real. So it's time wasted on wrong things, people that are demotivated because of the system, frustrating processes for customers, all the time and effort that we spend on building the wrong thing or not making a decision. All of those things are costly, but we often don't see them. And especially in the perspective of strategy realization, this is a big hurdle. So yeah, like Morten said, I just published a book about this topic, and I picked the six most common organizational blockers that I have seen in my work as an organizational change agent consultant. These are the six buckets of areas where I see a lot of challenges, and there's also a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of things in these six areas that we can do differently, progressive ways of working and practices that we can and should take a look at. The book is on Amazon, so you can just go ahead there, or you can look at unblockbook.net to get some more info. But let me just give you a taste of it first. It's good to know that the book is based on about 10 years of experimentation with all sorts of new ways of working areas. So you'll recognize some of these schools of thought in there. I have an agile background. I came from software development, but I became increasingly interested in how to apply these principles and practices to the management systems of organizations. So that's why I've also dove into self-management, holacracy, sociocracy, and all sorts of forms of new methods. And the Unblock book and the Unblock methods are basically a remix, a mix of all of those. And I think a list of things that really worked well in my experience, but it's not a fixed methodology. However, we are going to dive into strategy, and we have an organizational survey, like a self-assessment, a scan, whatever you want to call it, where people in only 5 minutes they fill out a questionnaire, and we ask them, where is your organization blocked? And they check off a bunch of boxes. So here's one of the first screens. And over the last couple of months, the 84 people that took this scan, about 70% reported challenges with strategy execution. So yeah, it's a really relevant topic. It's really a real pain that many companies are wrestling with. So yeah, what are those pains? Well, it's these things like doing too many things at once, not knowing how to prioritize, and then ultimately having a misalignment between strategy and action. But what you really want is to have a strategy that actually creates alignment and focus at scale. So that's the first thing I want to talk about is the strategy itself. So often when we talk about this, people say, you know what, our organization, our people, somehow they don't get it. You know, they're not going fast. We have all these hurdles, but it's often the strategy itself that is holding the organization back. So yeah, here's a funny joke from Corporator. Like this is our vision statement. Our management likes to keep it real. It's nice and funny, but it's also true. Like if you look at a lot of the strategies or visions or goal frameworks or PowerPoints that you see with lots of bullets, how do they help? How do they actually create focus, and how do they create alignment at scale? Often they don't. So if your strategy is not, if you're not able to execute your strategy, first thing to do is also look at the strategy and see if it actually really does anything for you. So here's a few other bad examples, and then I'm going to the great examples. So yeah, this is one of the strategy statements from Barnes and Nobles, a famous U.S.-based bookstore, right? To operate the best, blah blah blah. We're helping our customers and booksellers, blah 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 blah. So it's like one of those bland, unhelpful statements that doesn't really help somebody. A good test for a strategy is, imagine you hire a new person and they look at the strategy. Do they kind of have an idea of how it affects them and what they are going to do and what they're not going to do? Well, with this statement, obviously that won't really work. The other end of the spectrum, I see a lot of strategies that are just a list of to-dos. Basically, it's a list of projects, yeah, that is the strategy. So there's a lot of misconception about what it is and how and what to do. And one helpful frame for that is this. Yeah, this is a sandwich, but it's a particular type of sandwich. It's a concept by Nilofer Merchant, and she calls it an air sandwich. An air sandwich is a strategy that has a clear vision on the top, day-to-day action on the bottom, and virtually nothing in the middle. And that's problematic because it doesn't enable the people in the organization to think creatively about what to do. If you don't communicate the logic behind the strategy, and you only communicate like we want to be the best of the best, and you communicate the goals, then people will just follow those orders, and they're not able to give their full expertise and creative problem solving. And I'll get back to that later. It's an important part of the concept here. So what should strategy do for you? Well, there's two basic things that strategy should enable you to do. First of all, position your organization to outperform competitors in a chosen playing field. So it should allow you to win somewhat. So that means like you have to be clear about what do we want to win in and what do we need to do to win. So it's really an assumption, hypothesis of what you need to do to win in that playing field. The other thing, it needs to be able to focus the organization's energy on moving in a specific direction to create a joint outcome. So that's the picture on the bottom left, right? You don't want to move in 1,000 different directions, only 1 centimeter. You really want to, create that collective punching power in one area. So here's an example of what that could look like. Imagine you are a shoemaker, right? And you just make all sorts of shoes, but you have an insight. You've discovered that rubber, like I'm talking about decades ago, of course, this is not from today. Rubber is lightweight, strong, cheap, and sustainably produced. It's a new kind of material that is really amazing, and we can do stuff with. It's a discovery, and the strategy could be to really leverage the latest rubber molding technology to be the first on the market with those cheap, high quality construction shoes. So it's really about picking an area where you really want to win and leveraging either the insights or the obstacles that others have to be the best and to achieve your goal. So that's an example. This could create both a lot of focus and it could be an hypothesis that this is really going to be a winning strategy. And here's the air sandwich in a different format. We have on the top left, we have our purpose, our mission, our vision. And those are some of those inspiring things that will maybe stay the same for a couple of years, or maybe for a whole decade, or maybe for a century. It's why your organization exists, what it's trying to achieve in the long term, and that's great. It's inspiring. It's great. It's awesome. And we also have those goals in the bottom right corner. But what we really want is to get something that is on the cross edge of those two, and that is strategic intent. Or when Greg McKeown wrote it down in his book, it's called essential intent. It's the same concept. And it's really a way of describing a strategy that that really helps teams to align themselves towards achieving that vision. It's a way of phrasing the strategy to create that level of alignment and focus. So it's 2 to 3 years out. It's not 100 years out. It's not 50 years out. It should be short enough so you can actually know what it means for you on a day-to-day basis, and it should be long enough so that should actually be bold and ambitious. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of 1 year strategic plans. It's really like strategic intent should be a bit longer than that. So again, inspirational, meaningful, concrete, measurable, um, containing those bold choices, how you assume you're going to win. And it should be action oriented. We often tell our clients to start with the verb, like, what will we do? What is it actually we're going to do to achieve it? And refrain from mentioning solutions, but really talk about the desired results of the work to create that focus. Right. So this is a bit abstract theory, of course, but let's look at a bunch of examples. So what must we do in the next 2 to 3 years is then the question to ask. And this is an example that's used a lot, but I just love it because it's so simple and people know it. It's when Apple created the iPod a long time ago. They did not have the goal of creating a great digital music player. No, instead they had more a strategic intent saying, put 1,000 songs in your pocket. So this is one of those examples where the 1,000 songs is really ambitious and inspiring because it was never done before by then. It also is constraining because it's telling you that it needs to fit in your pocket. So it says something about the form factor of the device, and that allows to create focus. And it also, by reading this, we also know what we should not do. Right, we're not going to build a CD player that they had at the time. That needs to be something else. All right. When the storm Katrina hit a bunch of years ago in New Orleans, New Orleans was a mess, and there were a lot of new organizations that started, and they had this strategy of let's rebuild New Orleans, and that's obviously a great purpose statement, a reason of being, but it's also such a huge task that people were now confused what that means, and they were kind of daunted by the task. It did not allow them to prioritize. So one of those nonprofits, they used a different strategic intent, saying, build 150 affordable green storm-resistant homes. And this was their expression of what rebuilding New Orleans meant for them in the next 2 to 3 years. And then the final example is Tesla did not have the simple statement of launch the autopilot software that allows people to release the steering wheel in the car to drive itself. Now, their statement was like this: develop a self-driving capability that is 10 times safer than humans through massive fleet learning. So such a simple but powerful statement creates focus and allows you to constrain what is going to happen, and also inspire lots of different ways of achieving it. All right. Now imagine you have this beautiful strategy. You have a sense of what you need to do in the next 2 to 3 years. Well, going back to that first picture with the rainbow, you just make a plan, right? And then it should be great. Well, fact of the matter is, complexity. And this is a topic that has been part of this meetup group a couple times. But complexity dictates that we just cannot, in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases, cannot just plan our way into success. And a lot of the time that we're spending in those PowerPoints is just wasted, because so often we just have to try a bunch of stuff for us to know what actually really works. And that goes into the second chapter of my book, which is Unblocking Steering. And these are some of the organizational tensions that people mention. Unable to change course quickly enough, spending too much time planning, and not measuring if what we're doing has any impact. Right? So often I get into organizations where people are super, super busy, and when they've shipped the product, it's like fire and forget. It's like, oh, it's done, yeah, and we have a big party, but nobody actually measures the impact of the things that they're delivering. So yeah, what you want is an organization where we can take action, learn what works and what doesn't, and then steer continuously, right? Makes a lot of sense. A lot of the agile methodologies are based on this idea, of course. But I also go a step further, and this is a concept I learned many years ago when I was doing research at Spotify. Henrik put this in this beautiful diagram that he allows me to use. It's the concept of aligned autonomy. It's again, I think for the agile community, this should be well known. At the same time, I'm still surprised by how many people don't get this. It's really about giving the people that are doing the work the freedom to decide how they're going to solve the organization's problems. It's like we want both autonomy. We want to have autonomous teams, but we don't want to prescribe solutions. We want to really let them figure out the best way how, and only then can we leverage the collective expertise and the cross-functional thinking power that we have in the teams we've built, and really solve challenges day to day, because the teams are going to face lots of individual choices, and you don't really want them to go through the management chain every time when they face a question that they have. And unfortunately, that's still the reality in a lot of cases, and that's just too slow to achieve what we want to achieve. All right. In another picture by Henrik that I modified a bit, it's all about moving the compass and the navigational means from the hierarchy to the teams. It's really giving the teams a compass so they can navigate within the constraints that we give them, but they should be able to navigate themselves. One really helpful way to do that is using heuristics instead of directives. And this is one of my favorite practices. It's the even overstatement, inspired by initially the Agile Manifesto itself, then popularized by Holacracy, where they use this as strategy statements. And I just want to pause for a second and see if you're still awake and alive, because here are three even overstatements, and I'd love for you to tell me from these statements which companies could this be. So let's just start with the first one. Does anybody have an
Really, I
idea?
actually wanted to ask about this even over, because as a
Yeah,
non-native speaker, I mean, I have to buy a little bit of information. What does the phrase even over mean? Would you mind explaining
sure.
that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So let's take the first one. Speed and consistency, even over variety. It's expressing that we will always prioritize speed and consistency, and we're willing to sacrifice and not do variety. It's like individuals and interactions, even over processes and tools in the Agile Manifesto. It's really like a
Okay.
prioritization statement where we are going to value the things on the left more than the things on the right.
Okay, very good. So
Um,
it's
and
yes. Okay, okay. Yes, of course.
and both
So
of
it's
them
like,
both of them are valuable.
yeah, yeah. Yes. Thank
So
you.
does anybody have an idea of what that first statement is? It's really a company brand level statement. Maru has the bonus for guessing number three right. Number three is indeed Airbnb. So experience of being a local, even over predictable hospitality. It's a strategy statement that made the whole business model of the company come alive. Um, um, let's look at number one. If somebody has a guess for number one, number two, Apple. Okay, could be. Number one, Tesla. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Amazon. Yeah. Well, and like I can make arguments for why those are correct answers. But the answer I had for the first one are McDonald's. Let's discuss about these things, Tom, later. I'm not going to react to that right now. Um, so McDonald's is an example of a fast food chain, and most fast food chains have this kind of statement where it's like, we want to give the same food everywhere you go, and it's going to be consistent. The Big Mac is going to taste the same everywhere in the world where you get it. You want it fast, and what we're willing to trade off for that is variety. So you're not going to go and have the chef's choice of the day or the catch of the day. Um, and yeah, mobile experience could be Apple. One company where I see that even more, it's like Instagram, for example. If you ever try to post a photo through the desktop website, it's pretty terrible, right? And they've just consistently neglected the mobile web browser for the user experience in Instagram, and they spent all of their money and effort in the mobile experience. Great. And then the final one was indeed Airbnb. What is important to note is that these things should be reversible and still make sense. So for another company that could be all in desktop, could say, desktop experience is just a lot more important right now, and maybe we will build a mobile app in the future, but we're going to reverse this statement. So yeah, it's just an example of heuristics, and the way these can be used, and I'm just using a few more examples here. If you have a list of heuristics that are connected to your strategy, your 2 to 3 year goal, it allows you to constrain the space even further without prescribing what teams can and cannot do. So it's adding a bit of decision making logic, or expressing why you came to those statements, and you can give that as a compass to the teams that are going to navigate themselves from there. These evens over statements, they should be shorter term. So it could be like we have those brand level statements that we just expressed. Those are like a lot longer term. But very often we just ask like, hey, if you really want to achieve your strategic intent, what trade-offs are you going to make in the next quarter? And here are a bunch of more generic ones, right? For delivery teams, quality even over volume, speed even over perfection, innovation even over stability, and more behavioral is more like feedback even over comfort. And these things also can be reversed. One good thing even over another good thing. All right. Another thing in terms of aligned autonomy is that I don't believe a strategy should be cascaded. It's still the word a lot of companies use when they say, well, as a leadership team, we have figured out what we need to do. Now we just have to cascade it. And sometimes it just goes through management layers, hoping the managers, the middle managers will tell the teams what to do based on that. But the cascade is literally a word that's coming from a waterfall that flows top to bottom. It will never flow bottom to top. And if you were at the meetup with Julia Houts, you had the meetup about open strategy. I'm a huge fan of that, and it's all about participatory strategy, where we really want to also get the perspectives from the front lines that are actually connected or directly interfacing with the market and the customers, and getting their perspectives integrated. Self-alignment toward a strategy looks like this. The organization strategy is X, and our part in that is Y. So at the top level, you can have a top level strategy, but if you are in a specific area of the organization, that has a specific implication for you. And to maximize our contribution towards that wider strategy, we are going to, and then you ask teams to set a team level strategic intent. And then finally, to maximize the ability to deliver our part, we as a team or department are also going to apply the following trade-offs in the next quarter. So what you see here, this is a fractal. It's a strategy setting process that happens at every level of the organization while being interconnected. And it's something we've had a lot of success with. Let me just give you that in an example. We are responsible for reliable and available office IT in our hospital. And our hospital is growing and is hiring hundreds of new people in the next year. So imagine that's the situation. We are office IT team, and they're growing. Well, to maximize our contribution, we have to really automate provisioning so that new hires have a working laptop within 24 hours of starting. Right? Imagine they're going to recruit 100 new people every month. Well, you cannot do the manual provisioning anymore. We really have to do that. So that could be the strategic intent. Maybe that should not take 2 to 3 years to achieve, but still, this is the first thing that really is connected to the top level strategy that we should do. And then finally, to maximize our ability to deliver our part, our even over statements are or is laptops even over phones. So let's do the laptops first, and we don't care about the phones too much in the beginning. All right, just an example of self-alignment. Going further to the idea of giving the teams a compass to self-navigate is to let them think and talk about these 6 areas. We already said that what success is, setting their own strategic intent, letting them set their own 90-day outcomes based on that, letting them set the trade-offs, the prioritization, making those things transparent, of course, so you can actually see across teams what's going on. Also letting teams measure themselves, letting them figure out what are the things they want to measure to know if they're successful in achieving their strategic intent. Figuring out how we're going to decide things, clarifying decision rights within the team or between teams, and finally any other roles and agreements about how we want to work together. And that is a map, like that's a team charter almost that you're updating on a regular basis. But to really implement that idea of continuous steering, in the book I suggest a couple ways to have a strategic operating rhythm. It's the set of meetings that are purposely designed to look at these 6 elements on a cadence, on a time cadence, and that you're constantly moving and navigating. So the first of those meetings is a strategy meeting, where every quarter you take a day or half a day to look at the strategic intent, then create new 90-day outcomes, look at the progress so far, pick your new trade-offs, and move on, and really investing a day or half a day to really change that every time. Then on a weekly basis, I know a lot of agile teams are doing daily stand-ups and doing refinement meetings. For non-delivery teams, there's also a meeting type that we kind of lended from Holacracy, which we've called the Unblock meeting, but the origin is actually the action or tactical meeting from Holacracy. Step-by-step weekly 1 hour meeting where you look at those outcomes, look at the metrics, and really try to unblock the work for the next week. Then obviously retrospectives should happen often to look at all of these 6 things and evaluate what is working, what is not. And then on a regular basis, you can also have governance meetings where you update your working agreements, decision rights, and roles. So yeah, this is the strategic operating rhythm. These are the rituals that I think a team or a department could have to constantly move towards executing that strategy. And if you have these meeting types in place, and you can have your own, but this is like a default set that we often use. If you have this in place, you can reduce the need for a lot of other meetings because everything has a natural place to go. And this is the heartbeat that actually drives the work forward. Putting it in a different picture, this is about continuous steering towards that strategic intent there. So it's about navigating and steering around obstacles through measuring what you're doing, seeing if what you're doing really gets you in the right direction, getting you through from 90-day outcome to 90-day outcome, and then constraining the space through even overs, saying we're not going to move and going to swim in that sea, really going to stick within these boundaries that allows us to achieve our strategic intent. All right, on a final note, the thing I also want to talk really briefly about, and there's a lot more to say there, is unblocking decision making, because along the way in achieving the strategy, there's a lot of different decisions you need to be making, and that is in itself a blocker often. Companies, people, departments, they suffer from analysis paralysis, fear of failure, not having really great ways to decide quickly, unclarity about who decides what, consensus addiction. All of those things are challenging. And from one of the sources, and I don't have the source here present, but I can look it up. It takes over 20 days to get approval for an unbudgeted expenditure in a lot of larger organizations. So imagine you have a new idea and you really want to try something. Well, imagine you need to take 3 weeks to figure out who decides that and get approval for that, if you already know where the budget needs to come from. So yeah, that's really hindering organizations from achieving and running those experiments that they need to achieve, that they need to run to achieve their strategies. So yeah, ultimately you want to improve the speed of decision making at every level while also increasing quality and inclusion. There's ways to do that, and there's many ideas, but I'm going to share only one framework here because it's my favorite at the moment, and I use it a lot. It's a concept from James Clear. He had a very minimal blog post about it, but it was groundbreaking for me at least. This idea that there's only 3 types of decisions: hats, haircuts, and tattoos. And as you can see, I'm a Formula One racing fan. My first book was a lot about Formula One, so I use the photos here. But hats and haircuts and tattoos. So let me just go through them. If you're gonna buy a hat, you can just go to the store, try a whole bunch of them, and you just buy the one that you like the most. If you bought one and you don't like it a few weeks in, you can either maybe bring it back and get your money back, or just buy a new one. Right? It's inconsequential. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to live with the consequences of that decision very long. The middle type is haircuts. So you get a haircut of your favorite racing team, like this boy here, and this is a risky haircut. Like, this is not a normal haircut. This is a pretty risky haircut. This can go wrong. It can be very ugly. But for most people, and that does not include me, honestly, the hair grows back in a few weeks' time. So it can go wrong. But if it goes wrong, it might be embarrassing for a couple of weeks, but it doesn't. You shouldn't really go and analyze all the possible solutions of all the possible haircuts and all the barbers that you have in the city before you actually go and take one. You can just say, well, I trust this barber. I just go in and do it. So again, it's a reversible decision, and you don't have to live with the consequences for that long. So you can go take that decision quite quickly. Only for a very small percentage of decisions, they're resembling more like tattoos. So technically a tattoo is reversible, but it's costly and painful, I understood. So yeah, only for those decisions that are irreversible or the cost of reversing it is high, take the time to really analyze all the possible options and go and have that debate and bring it back to the meeting next week and next week and next week and take that time to decide. But there's only a super small percentage of decisions where that's the case. All right. Again, there's a lot more in the books, but I just want to share this favorite framework of mine. Um, that is concluding my talk here. So if you want to learn more about these concepts, pick up the book, pick up one of my books. Formula X is a business fable. So if you're a fan of Five Dysfunctions of a Team or the Phoenix Project, that's the book for you. It's Formula One racing inspired, and the Unblock book is really a practical guide for leaders who wanna clear their way for results and develop a thriving organization. All right, that's it. Let's hear your
Thank
questions.
you. I have a
Let's see
first
what we got.
practical question. Is it okay to get your slides for distribution?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yes.
Maro, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on the slide with the three types of decisions. I remember having read something similar. I don't know when. I'm not even sure if I can trust my memories, my age, but I wanted to propose something more on the slide. If you just go back to that slide,
Yeah, I
because
can share it again if you want.
thank you. That would make it easier to follow when I want to talk about it. Is the haircut type of decision. I think there should be one more between the haircut one and the tattoo one, uh,
Mm-hmm.
which is the as an example, as an analogy, you could use buying fashion designer clothes or something. So the cost to reverse it is very low, like the Amazon's uh,
Mm-hmm.
guy, I forgot his name, the one from Rocket Blue or something. I don't know. The Jeff Bezos, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
like his revolving door decisions because they use a
Yeah.
just two types of decisions basically. But this one has a cost, a very high cost. The the haircut has a social cost and maybe psychological cost, but the other one has
Mm-hmm.
cost. That's all. Just wanted to add this as an idea.
Yeah.
But I get the idea of the taxonomy here. I get it. One of them is
Yeah.
very hard to reverse, and the other one is very easy to reverse, low cost, like the hats, something.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I like about this simple framework, because I've talked about type one and type two a lot in the past, but this one really sticks. So I've often just mentioned it once, and then a few years later, I hear that they're still using this terminology. In leadership teams, they talk about like, is this a haircut? Is this a tattoo? And then kind of that really changes the frame. I always love these kinds of more simple ideas and practices that just stick, and it's never perfect. So I agree, like there could be lots of more nuances in there, and I also have flowchart diagrams and stuff. But yeah, hopefully
Just
this is
like
helpful.
it's very helpful. That's why I couldn't stop jumping. I don't have questions actually. I just was taking notes. It's very similar to your other heuristic. It's another heuristic for
Yeah,
constraining decision making. It's
yeah,
just, but I'm also a big believer in using simple tactics. Heuristics could be an example of tactics for decision making. Tactics are not just implement strategies. They can be
yeah,
used to help with decision making. That's one. Another one I wanted to contribute was on your slide with the compass. I like it
yeah,
very much because I have a similar decision making slide too. I wanted to propose four different input streams for you, maybe for your you're an author, so your head is always going probably, so you have other ideas. But the following slide with the map,
yeah.
with the events, I wanted to
With the operating rhythm, yeah,
yes, exactly. Cadences and schedules and stuff. I wanted to propose four different areas where people have done similar work, and I found it very useful. The first one is Kanban events, so we go through the whole Kanban University set of certifications all the way to the end to become a KMP. They have very, very advanced, very structured ways for their type of work. Of course, it's very contextual to
hmm,
organize events and for what purpose and how you run them. The other one is Scrum.inc, Scrum at Scale. They have I find very interesting ways to scale decision making. The third one is holacracy, but I think you're very familiar with it because you
yeah,
mentioned it to quite a few people. And the fourth one is um, somebody who's super smart called James Coplian, and he co-collaborated with a lot of people on design patterns for Scrum initially, but he has a subcategory of these design patterns for decision making.
hmm,
And if you don't find it, I can send you the link. I'll send you on LinkedIn. That's
yeah, sure.
my two most important contributions. I leave the space now for my esteemed colleagues in the
Thank you, Maroon.
thank you for listening.
Thank you. See, Emma has a question. Um, because of how slow decision making is, especially for unfunded initiatives, aren't we making a lot of hat and haircut decisions into full body to do decisions? Yes. While we have their attention, let's bring in all the ideas. Yeah, it's true. Like I use this example in my book as well, where a very small inconsequential decision, the moment it starts running up the hierarchy, it grows and grows and grows and grows. So in the book, I use a story of I use a lot of fictional smart short stories in the book because I like that narrative format. It's about a restaurant manager suggesting a change to the menu, and they ask like, hey, shouldn't we just make the menu design different? And they ask the manager, and that manager brings it up to another manager, and they ask for funding, and then in the end, it ends up with the leadership team, and the decision looks like we should change all the menus in all the stores globally at once. And that's obviously a high risk decision that requires lots of scrutiny and a huge investment. Well, actually, the restaurant manager just wanted some approval to run an experiment. So yeah, it's true. Like while we have their attention, let's bring in all the ideas because we wouldn't want to bother the leaders with the small stuff, right? That's indeed a dysfunction.
Thank you. I'm trying to get the overview of all the notes. I think there's one question from Tom, which is which measurable strategy results have you observed from these strategies?
Yeah, so I'm not a scientist, so I don't have like I'm also pretty bad at capturing data, honestly. So that's the second reason. But I found these ideas very useful in unblocking organization achieving their strategies. It's really the antidote to a lot of the dysfunctions I see, and I've used these methods with I think by now it should be at least 80 or 100 different organizations across the world. It's not a silver bullet. Stuff doesn't always work that way, but it does allow teams to, first of all, clarify their actual strategy. It allows them to, and then allows them to put into rhythms and methods to measure and achieve progress to it. So yeah, you have to trust my word there.
Thank you. So Jurriaan, I was already showing you, it's a little bit blurry, but I picked up a copy of your book. I really appreciate
thank you.
how you're approaching things. And I mean, the one thing that really intrigued me is that you talk about, and you talk about a bit about idea is integrate instead of cascading.
Yeah.
And could you tell something more about that? At least I feel there's something really powerful in that idea. But maybe you could open up more.
Yeah. It's the example I used with the self-alignment where it's like it's really allowing teams to align themselves towards the strategy. So that's the big paradox or dilemma with aligned autonomy, where it's like you want to have autonomous teams, but you also want them to work on the problems that matter. And that's it's achievable if you tell people and be really clear about these are the problems that are essential for our organization to solve in the next 2 to 3 years. We really need to do this. You tell me how you're going to do that. And what are your creative solutions? And that's what I mean with integration, because those ideas, they come from the bottom. And then that actually maybe feeds into the top line strategy because that allows new ideas to come and that allows maybe to update it. So that's very much aligned with the open strategy ideas.
Yeah. Well, so you might know more than me about that. I think it's even an evolution of that idea. So the open strategy very much is about the act of strategizing, involving people in expressing the strategy.
Yeah.
You're actually beyond that, if I understand correctly, is that now you have an idea of what strategy should be overall. And after that moment, people integrate to that, like you explained, by saying, oh, wow, if this is what you want to do, then here's how we can help from our part.
Yeah.
Is that correctly understood?
For sure. Yes, and also it should lead the execution should lead to new insights and should inform the next iteration of the strategy. Like the thing you don't want to do, like even though the strategic intent has 2 to 3 year time frame, you shouldn't evaluate it only every 2 to 3 years. You should evaluate every half year or maybe every quarter to see, is this still the right thing to do?
Yes.
And then you kind of put that marker further away.
So could you tell a bit more about how you have seen this happen in practice? Because I'm sure there are some conversations in around what are those part contributions to the overarching strategic intent? How do, for example, two parties who contribute, how do they cross integrate? How is that built into the governance? How is that playing out?
Yeah, like there's a lot of events you can use for that. Like I'm not a huge fan of the SAFe methodology. Like you're a trainer in, I think, more than. But one of the things I have found useful is, this PI planning type events, but more about the principles that are used there, which is like, let's come together every once in a while, where we explain the strategy, and then the teams really think about, what does that mean for us? Like, what we can do, what can we do, and what are the dependencies? What are the great ideas here? And then at the end of the day, people walk out with an integrated set of perspectives on what it means for the next period. So yeah, there's lots of, if you do that right, there's lots of cross-pollination that could happen.
Thank you.
I
I'm
see
just
two
wondering if
questions
we
in the chat.
overlooked any questions in the chat. Maybe
There's two.
people can.
Chris asks, and Chris, if you want to verbalize your question, that's amazing as well. Otherwise, I'll just read it. Why do you not consider processes and systems a separate dimension, and is the most important blocker we as human beings? Yeah. Processes and systems, I think all of these. So if you talk about the six dimensions: strategy, steering, decision making, ownership, meetings, and teamwork, all of them have structures and processes that are helping or disabling an organization to achieve their results, and all of them have human elements that are underneath. I sometimes just say, like, well, people come to work with the best intentions. They want to do good work. Everybody wants to do good work, but somehow the systems we build as human beings, when we're organizing at scale, are just creating dysfunction, and that has to somehow come from our human nature, and our human nature of being afraid of failure, being afraid of rejection, being afraid of losing our certainties. It's the biases that we have in our brains. Like we are flawed, and we have to figure out ways to overcome that. So I don't address it in my book as a separate thing, but it's really integrated in all of those six dimensions, I think. And the art of action, Sigbjörn asked me, it is a book I have not yet read. It's been recommended to me many times, so there must be a lot of alignment. But I've not read it in detail, so I'll definitely look it up.
Good. It's a good sign. People
there's more.
keep telling me I should read it because it's
Yeah,
similar to what I'm talking about, and I picked up on it.
yeah,
I think it's one of the cornerstones, so you should. I was
yeah. And yeah, it's probably really interesting, and I think I've tried to integrate. I've tried to integrate some of the most modern work practices that I know of that are also coming from the self-management world, because I think that's just really aligned with this idea of aligned autonomy. So there's one more that Tom asked, I think.
Oh, is there another question?
Oh no, Tom
Otherwise,
already
I have one
explained
for
it.
you. I was
Yeah, go ahead.
wondering, have you some thought on the discipline of portfolio management and how that plays in? And the reason I'm asking is that it's somehow the function for strategy execution, at least when you work with technology portfolios. So it somehow
Yeah,
plays a central role as an coordination function and as an arbitrator. Any thoughts on
yeah,
that and how that works?
yeah. It's a useful thing to do as an idea, but it really depends on how it's implemented. So a lot of companies have implemented this as almost like a command and control function, where it's like, I'm gonna have this dashboard and I'm going to manage the portfolio of strategic work through a spreadsheet, and I'm going to see red, green, or yellow, and I'm going to direct people to do something about it and steer away. A lot of the portfolio management stuff I've seen is a lot of output driven rather than outcome driven, and I think that's where some of the big unlocks can be. If a portfolio management really is able to clarify the strategic intent of the organization, if it's able to keep track of all the experiments that are running, if it's able to keep track of measuring direction and are we moving in the right direction, then it could be a super helpful support function to do this process. But yeah, it's often implemented in a more traditional top-down manner.
Okay.
At least that's my experience. What do you think, Martin?
So what I have observed is that it's just a function. People in organizations struggle to make work well. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of being tried, and it's not that it's not
Yeah.
working, but it's not really, you're never really reaching where you would like to be with it.
Yeah, and I think an opportunity for those departments is to be equipped also with organizational change skills and mandate.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing I often see. Like you pick a new direction as a company, you pick a new
Yeah.
strategy, but you don't really consider if your organization is effective towards that new idea. We try to fit it in the exact structures that we've put in place before. And the companies that are doing it really well, they have more like if you look at fast agile, for example, like a fluid organization where people can switch teams and switch roles depending on what the work is. And in my chapter around ownership, I also talk a lot about marketplaces for mission-based teams, where it's like, you know what, I no longer contribute to this. I want to do something else. Well, here's the thing I want to do, and enabling people to move between those structures fluidly depending on direction you're going in is another layer of unlocking that could happen. That is still pretty basic in a lot of
Yeah.
ways in most
Yeah.
companies.
Makes sense. Mato, go ahead.
Ah, who is this?
Yeah, just in that one particular point, having had that conversation with clients, the this idea is often misunderstood. What the way middle management or decision makers, leaders, sorry, understand this is, yeah, my employees are gonna just, send me a wish list of what they want to do, and they're not gonna be motivated, and I will lose control over where my work is going, my organization is going, etc. And they don't understand that this is not about people having, sudden desires of what they want to do. It's not a holiday colony in the
Yeah.
company. It's really they see what is useful for the company,
Yeah.
what is impactful, and they say, "Hey, this is where I can have the maximum impact." It's not just, "Oh, this is what I want to do." That's not, I just wanted to mention this.
Yeah. No, it's for a lot of leaders, it sounds really scary to say you can decide what you want to do. But it should also be if you're a bit more advanced, if you see a lot of divergence, if you see people moving into in your opinion very strange or unhelpful direction, you should use that as information and say, hey, that's interesting. What is going on here? Either they're seeing something that I don't see, and we should really lean into this and really understand if I'm missing some market signals, or I have not constrained the system enough. I have not been clear enough about the real problems that matter. So you go and point that arrow, your finger at yourself again, and say, "Hey, I've done something, so that people I've missed something, so that people are suggesting these very strange things to do." So yeah, there's safe ways to do that. And in the book, and there's another video, an interview I did with the company Roche. They have, if I have it correctly, over 500 or maybe even 1,000 self-managing teams that are mission based. So literally, if you are delivering a certain drug in a certain country and you're facing a challenge, you can go and put that challenge on the marketplace and say, hey, I'm assuming there's this sticky problem for this type of patient, for this type of drug. I'd love more brains on this problem, assuming that other people will wrestle with this and it's valuable for the company. Who wants to join me? Then when multiple people apply for volunteering, basing their time for that, then that team starts running and chasing that thing. They often do it part-time next to their normal roles, but it's been a huge unlock for that company. So if you do it well, and be flexible with resources and letting people decide what they want to contribute, it can be super valuable.
Thank you. I think we have time for me to just go back on some of the initial questions. So I was wondering, have you seen something change to the topic of strategy recently? You mentioned that the book is based on years of experience, and I'm wondering within the last sort of short-term period, half year, 1 year, etc. Have you sensed anything changing around the topic? And would you
Yeah, not
talk
necessarily
about
the
that?
practice of not necessarily the practice of creating strategy, but the strategies are in at least some of the client organizations that I work with a lot more operational excellence or cost focused. because of market conditions.
Great.
I don't think that's a problem per se, but it's also often very short term thinking that I see, and some companies are stopping the innovations that they've been building up over the years that have not bared fruit yet, or they're really weakening their long term position and trading it off versus making the short term stock market happy. So that's definitely been a challenge, and then the thing I always tell them is like the hidden costs are really in your organizational depth that we talked about. It's your organizational effectiveness where you can gain a lot of value. But yeah, that doesn't look that it's not as quick as cutting a couple jobs or stopping investments or travel spend, right? That's direct P&L impact. So
You also noticed you had a slide you attributed to Henrik Niebuhr, which was about the like hierarchical organization with a more compass driven, I think you called it entrepreneurial organization. How do you see that balance play out? Is it like is it like giving powers away from the hierarchical organization to the more entrepreneurial organization, or is it through empowerment, or how does that transfer play out, or is it like a permanent transfer of power from one type of organizational construct to another?
yeah, it's the shift to yeah, empowerment to me is a difficult word because it assumes that people are not already powerful. So I have some problems with that term, but in the end, it's about distributing decision making and mandates and decision making rights to where the decisions need to happen. And I think that is a shift that already happened when companies starting to working with agile teams. At least the more idealist practitioners always believe that is the thing what it was about, including myself, is about giving teams more decision making power and moving away from the layers and layers of steering committees and paperwork to decide what we're going to do next. And you can go much further with that is what I'm trying to advocate. Go as far as um, you know really flipping the hierarchy and saying, we have these teams that create value. What do they need to do the right thing, rather than what can the teams do for us as leaders?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And I think that's a beautiful and idea, and you express it wonderfully. If you do that, do you still need the hierarchical organization?
Yeah, I think it's really context specific. I have another article that I wrote a bunch of years ago about a racing director team. Now I don't go into all details because it will take too long. But there's cases where a strict hierarchy is actually pretty useful, and same goes to Formula One racing teams. There is an extremely clear hierarchy of decision making rights, and to me, it's more about creating that clarity and thinking and being intentional about how much decision making rights do you want to put where. And just acknowledging that if you move it away from the traditional structures, you can go faster and be more adaptive. And it's almost like the smart thing to do if you want to be constantly winning in the market. And still, like it could be helpful to reserve the tattoo type decisions to a more slower process. But it's about designing the organization in a way that it's fit for that purpose.
Very good. Thank you. I think we are approaching the end of our time. Is there anything we can do for you?
Oh, well, if you found this interesting, obviously you can pick up a copy of the book and give me feedback, try stuff out. It's very practical stuff. And yeah, you can find the book on Amazon or in other bookstores or the links I shared. And finally, if you want to keep connected, connect to me on LinkedIn or subscribe to my newsletter. Happy to stay in touch.
Thank you. Maybe we then cut it here. So Jurriaan, thank you very much for taking time to join us. Really appreciate it. And thanks a lot for sharing your ideas. And absolutely, we are already connected. So I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I appreciate the invite.
Bye-bye.
Thank you a lot, Jurriaan. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.